welcome everybody to our latest Phenomenati micro webinar. I'm joined here today by my colleagues Scott Foote and Joel Jacobs from Phenomenati. We're also very lucky to be joined by Ed Adams, who's the head of cybersecurity North America for Bureau Veritas Cybersecurity. He's also a best-selling author. I'm Mark Dunning. I'm a vice president here at Phenomenati. And today I wanted to talk about, I recently saw an article on industrialcyber.co about New York proposing new cybersecurity regulations for its water and wastewater systems. They got a $2.5 million grant to try and offset the compliance costs associated with this thing. The initiative would require public water systems to adopt enforceable cybersecurity measures, including formal security programs, risk assessments, and technical safeguards to defend against cyber attacks, which for the uninitiated sounds sort of silly because what does water treatment have to do with cybersecurity? But this is actually a big problem. In fact, back in 2021, there was an attack on the Oldsmar water treatment plant in Florida where someone attempted to alter the levels of chemicals put into the water, and they were going to try and dump a bunch of lye into the water, which could have potentially poisoned thousands of people. So obviously this is a real concern. And Scott, as we know, a lot of this technology is older, and legacy operational technology systems in water utilities are often highly vulnerable to cyber attacks. So what are the risks that we're really looking at here?
Well, especially in this particular sector, in all critical infrastructure, but in this particular sector, the primary risks are first and foremost the availability of the resource, in this case, water. Right? But we have the same issues with energy as another good example. But the one you brought up, Mark, was one of integrity, where the water supply, it wasn't shut off. Like we didn't disable pumps and other types of components in the SCADA environment. What happened was somebody got control of the human interface and started to ramp up the mixture of lye, which is meant to clean the water, but it got up to human, what was potentially poisonous to humans. So the risks there are first and foremost public safety and public health in general, the availability of the critical infrastructure. But I would call those the first derivative risks. The second derivative risks are probably what that particular nation state actor was up to. They knew that they could be seen. They did not really hide the fact that they were trying to do this. What was important to them was the erosion of trust. To take an entire society and break down their fundamental trust on the most basic of critical infrastructure. Now, of course, the Oldsmar facility, there could have been things like compliance penalties, reputational harm. There could have been liabilities if there were lawsuits. But that's downstream, and that's just to that one player. This threat actor was really targeting the confidence of a society and the trust they have in their critical infrastructure. So these are pieces on a chessboard. The attackers manipulating critical infrastructure treat it as though there are pieces on a chessboard, and ultimately they're trying to sow chaos in a society.
Yeah, that's pretty terrifying, particularly when if I understand it correctly, the reason that the Oldsmar attack was caught was because an operator was looking at his screen and saw his mouse moving without any sort of alerts or anything that actually caught it.
That's exactly what happened. Yeah, the human actually saw some interference on the user interface. It was quite clear that there was remote access and somebody was sitting at the controller and not trying to hide what they were actually doing.
So, Joel, obviously that is not the way we want to catch cyber attacks all the time. So what should be done to protect these OT environments?
Well, they're inherently complex. In many cases, they're very large. In many cases, there is a mixture of legacy equipment and systems that might even be ancient. There's examples of this in other critical infrastructure spaces, but water systems have been around for a very long time, and many of the components of them are are extremely old, often analog, maybe even not connected to anything. Some may see that as an advantage because it's harder to connect to something that's not connected. But that kind of security by obscurity isn't really going to safeguard you in a systematic way. So the full assessment of the environment and understanding what the inputs and outputs could be and what has been connected in ways that are there to help the operations also causes connections to larger, wider networks in ways that aren't particularly predictable because they're often bespoke pieces of connectivity that are then vulnerable in their own ways. Drawing an analogy, a few years ago, the governor of Massachusetts made a comment about the MBTA, the subway system, was relatively safe because everything in it was so old that it wasn't connected to anything. And it was tongue in cheek to a degree, but it was also somewhat true. And as they have digitized and modernized, systems like transportation systems and water systems have connected things that really weren't intended to be. The full scope understanding, assessment and understanding of what the vulnerabilities are, what the risks, the highest risks are, and then the controls that are appropriate to those risks needs to happen in these very large, complex, and often old systems. And this is not new. There was a critical infrastructure analysis report from 1997 to the President of the United States describing a whole series of critical infrastructure's concerns, cyber being not as prominent as it is now, but it included water systems as part of the areas of concern.
Yeah, so I mean, to kind of just piggyback off of that, I mean, you really need to understand your environment and understand where you're potentially vulnerable. And as we know, these states have tight budgets. So when we talk about this sort of massive systems that they're trying to secure, they really need to be confident that they're spending their money the right way in an attempt to protect these OT systems. Once they've invested in these things, how can they know that it's actually working as expected?
Yeah, well, let me just summarize very quickly some of the things that both Scott and Joel said. One, we're too dependent on undependable technology, and our reliance on these interconnected systems is growing faster than our ability to defend them. And it's not necessarily defending them just from bad actors or nation states, also accidents, because accidents happen. And this is especially true at local and municipal levels where investments in budget are more constrained. But the systems are no less complex, as Joel effectively articulated. So one effective way is to test these systems, but test the systems using things like crisis simulation. And this is just building off of classic disaster recovery and business continuity concepts. You don't have to use very expensive cyber ranges or infrastructure to have an effective crisis simulation exercise. You can use tabletop exercises, paper and whiteboards. It's really discussions. So imagine threats and attack vectors that could impact your critical infrastructure. And here we're talking about water systems, but also power systems, medical infrastructure, et cetera. And then model ways how you might thwart those attacks. And it is threat modeling 101. It's just applied to critical infrastructure. And for an example, let's just say there's an intentional water hammer that was deployed that could halt or reverse the flow of water. And so what does that mean? It means no morning coffee. It means no toilets. But more importantly, it means no fire rescue services, no hospitals, etc. So now these are threats with real implications that we now have to start modeling. How could we thwart those attacks to prevent those nasty situations from happening? And this is not theoretical. There are so one example of an ongoing successful series or campaign of attacks against U.S. public water systems is Volt Typhoon. and it's something that's very easily discoverable if you're not aware of it. So use Volt Typhoon as one of the threats in your tabletop exercises. And Joel, you mentioned how a lot of these systems have analog services and analog devices in them. That can be an advantage. I actually love the concept of utilizing analog services and solutions as a fallback, basically have them in place for when connection dependence fails. So you still have some kind of operation function. And in the extreme, one could think if you can't afford to protect it, you can't afford to connect it. So let's make sure that those analog services are available in the horrible event that our connected services do fail.
All great advice. So guys, thanks for all of this, and thanks to everybody for joining today. And if you want, thanks, that was terrific. And it's clear that you guys are very well versed in this stuff. If you are not familiar with Bureau Veritas, it has a fascinating history. For nearly 200 years, Bureau Veritas has done nothing but third-party independent verification, certification, and testing, including many OT users and manufacturers. So they're really the best at this stuff. If you do need help with this thing, you can check them out at Bureau Veritas Cybersecurity, and they are cybersecurity.bureauveritas.com. And if you'd like help in developing comprehensive cybersecurity strategies so you can sleep better at night and not worry about all the things we just talked about, we here at Phenomenati are happy to help. You can reach us at phenomenati.com, or you can email me at mark@phenomenati.com. And good luck to everybody, and thanks for watching.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, everybody.